I was reading an article you wrote recently where you talked about when you first received the advice that you had been offered a publishing deal through Ultimo, that it was the first emotion was a sense of relief. Do you want to talk us through that?
Well, because I'd got close a few times, I think. Like I said, like I got a lot of good rejections. So they weren't form letter rejections. They were thank you for this, it's the concept is great, or you can write, but blah blah blah. So I was getting close, and then with the banjo as well, and I didn't win, which was fine. I didn't necessarily expect to, but it was, and then we thought maybe HarperCollins will publish it, and then no. I nearly signed with two agents early on in the piece, and that was pretty exciting, and then it just didn't happen. So I think I was at the point where I was like, I'm just not going to get my hopes up until I need to see this in writing, sort of thing, because you just don't want to be disappointed. And it's a bit me, it's a bit my personality. It's not like I'm a cup half empty person, but I think I just like to keep things, sort of keep a lid on it until I know, because I don't want to get disappointed. So it is a bit of relief, in a way. I think the points along my journey that I've celebrated, like absolutely, sort of just so pumped and like, this is amazing, I'm going to do this, are not the ones you would expect. It's not necessarily the you've been shortlisted for this prize, or here's a book deal, we want to sign you. It was bits earlier on when I just got great feedback or something, somebody who you respect saying, you're good. Like, I think you should keep at this. Those early boosts of confidence are worth more than anything, I think, because it's the early on when you will talk yourself out of this. Um, yeah, that was my experience anyway.
Yeah, I remember getting a feedback from somebody saying that my short stories had got him back into reading, and that was something that really sort of that's part of what you write for, is getting people to telling your stories. But to hear that somebody didn't usually read much and then started reading my stories and then has basically bought every book that I do, and he's sort of saying, look, is there any other authors that write similar to you, so I can actually start reading more stuff? Because and that sort of enthusiasm, creating that enthusiasm for your own writing is really helpful and really sort of supports you in your endeavors.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think all writers have those elements of self-doubt. And we've talked as Harry said before about the beauty of short stories where you can test your grasp of the writing craft, get feedback and get some validity around and whether, as you said, when someone said to you, look, you're good at this, you can do this. And I think oftentimes our own doubts can kind of stop us from this. The voice in the head says, you have no right to be doing this, you're not good enough. And have you, if you go back to when you first started writing stories, when was that? And at what point did you progress from sort of tinkering with telling stories and creative writing into, I want to have a crack at doing this more seriously?
Well, very late in the piece, and I wish that I hadn't waited so long, because I loved writing when I was a kid and was very good at English in high school and liked creative writing. And my first degree, I started as like doing a journalism degree. I did 1 year of journalism and decided journalism wasn't going to be my thing. And looking back, I mean, partly, I think just the time and the place that I grew up, the idea of a creative career, like that you could actually be a writer. I didn't know any writers. We were big readers in my family, but I didn't know what being an author was. And I think it was less accessible than it is these days. So I did write through my 20s just for enjoyment. But in my 30s, when I was building my career, having kids, like I definitely put it aside for those few years. And it was only when I got into my 40s that I decided, I just need to do this even just for myself. And getting like that inner voice telling you you're good or you're bad. You can understand where it comes from because you might be bad. Actually, you are pretty bad to start with. Like, let's be honest, most people's early work isn't great. And I think it's when I realized that, because I would read Tim Winton or Helen Garner and think, well, I can't write that. But they didn't write that in their first draft, or
No.
maybe Tim Winton did. But yeah,
Nah.
but they develop their craft. They also, you're working with an editor at some point, you're working with a publisher at some point. What we're reading on the shelf is not a first draft. And so a first draft can be you just telling it to yourself, it's whatever you want it to be. And it mightn't be very good, and that's okay. But if you think I've got something here and I want to keep at it, only you can decide that. And actually, the turning point for me, I got rejected by agents who I had nearly signed with, and I thought this was going to be a deal, and then it fell through. And I remember getting an email saying, well, you might just want to crack on with your next book. And I had this whole book that I had worked on for so long and meant so much to me. And I remember I was just gutted. I was just so gutted. And my darling daughter, who's 17, sort of came and found me hiding in the corner, in the fetal position. I wasn't in the fetal position, but I was just having a little moment. And she came up and she knew I was a bit down about it. And I remember she said, Mama, I believe in you. And I thought, oh, Christ's sake, I can't not do this now because I'm always telling her, you have to keep trying even when you fail, you have to get up and try again. So, and then I got angry. And the thing is, it's not that I'm so incredibly talented, but I am incredibly stubborn. And it really pissed me off that this person was like, you might want to crack on with your next book now. I thought, I will decide when I'm going to crack on with my next book. And so I rewrote it in 2 weeks and entered the Banjo Prize and then was the runner-up. So,
Yeah.
sometimes that kick up the butt, that just sort of being a bit stubborn and angry that someone else told you can't do something is all you need. So
Yeah.
those rejections are good, people. They are good.
Yeah, that self-belief is important, isn't it? And I recently had a conversation with my wife. She just read a new manuscript that I've written, and I finished it, and I was reasonably happy with it. But I've had it edited, but I've really had no other sort of beta readers read it. So I said, "You can just read it," and she did. She spent the last kind of week reading it, and I knew that she'd be honest with me. And I said, "Look, if it's crap, just tell me," because I felt like I've been at a bit of a crossroads after over the last few months around. I kind of planned that this book might be a book one of a series, but I don't want to invest my time and start writing a book two if it is a dud and if I'm never going to have any chance to get it published. So I kind of just wanted that validation around, is this worth persisting with through more work and pitching and entering competitions and so on? Does it have the potential for me to stick with this? Because I really would like to write a book two and a book three because I love the new characters that I've developed and the setting and the storyline and
And you
so on.
thought it would be a good idea to ask your wife that question? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, normally, I know they say you shouldn't ask your loved ones because they'll give you a biased approach, but I know that she would be
Oh,
honest with
no,
me.
no. The problem is they won't.
So, but anyway, she gave it a tick of approval. So it
Oh.
just gave me the confidence to say, you know what, I'll keep pushing on with it. As you say, you just got to, if you believe in what you've written, persist.
Yeah. And for the record, my wife is my alpha reader, so she reads the stuff that comes straight off the first draft, the raw stuff, and then she tells me it's crap. So
But what you
it got
say,
better.
Christine, I can definitely attest to the fact that, you made the comment before, Christine, that the first stuff that you write usually is crap. And I look back at my very stuff I wrote 20 years ago, my very, very first editions of the book then end up getting published after 20 years of different iterations and editing. At the time, I thought I was really good. I thought, I've been reading all these other authors and I can write just like them. Looking back now, I think at least that's a positive because I now recognize just how bad I was and maybe just how much I've learnt in the interim. So I think that's also a message for any writer is that you will always get better.
Yeah, and you have to write a
Hopefully.
lot of shit to get to the good stuff. That's just the truth,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
you've got to write to really and read and get advice, and as you say, you go to writing courses, all these things to help develop your craft. Can I
mm,
ask, Christine, in terms of your writing process, with I think I read that you were doing, well, you said you did the Curtis Brown course. I did one of those courses as well. I think I read you were doing night classes. You've got a professional career, family. How did you juggle all that and still find the time to write? Because, a lot of writers say, "Oh, how many people have you come across that said, oh, I'd love to write, but I just don't have the time." And I've often said, um, if you have this idea that's burning inside you and you just feel the need to write, I wrote a book, half hour on the way, on a train into police headquarters. And I had 30 minutes each way. I had an hour a day to write. I was very busy at the time, but I had the story that I felt I needed to write,
mm.
and I found the time. And that's what I always say. What would be your advice in terms of how did you juggle all your commitments but still find the time to write and have some sort of routine?
Well, you don't have time. I mean, there's not, it's just well of time and I just have to find it. Oh, there it is. Oh, never knew I had those extra 3 hours. I mean, if you're busy, you're busy. You have to make the time, as you said, or you have to carve it out, and do what you can in the space that you can. And I mean, if you want to get stuff done, ask a, ask a working mother, basically, she'll get it done. So um, I did write the first draft of that book, largely in 2020 in lockdown, and I had a full-time job and I had two children homeschooling. Now, I didn't assist them very much, let's be honest about that. I mean, my son learnt to play the drums really well, though, in one of those years. He did barely any school, but he's come through it. He can read and write, and he's 14 now, and he's doing really well. And it was all pretty chaotic, and it was pretty hard working as well. But I told myself normally I was door to door, maybe 45 minutes commuting each way. So that's an hour and a half. So every morning I got up at 5:30, 6 o'clock and just went downstairs to my study and wrote for an hour and then did my work day. And then at the end of the work day, when I clocked off, I stayed at my desk for another hour. And I did that every day for like 6 months and got a first draft written. And I'm going to have to do it again. And in fact, I've committed to it I went to a session at the Victorian Writers Centre they run sessions for established author forums. It was with Melanie Cheng, who, I don't know if you know Melanie's work. She's a very, very talented author. She won the Victorian Premier's Literary Award a few years ago. So we were all talking about what our routine was going to be to get our next book written. We had to be very specific and share it with the group. So I made some very specific commitments about how I was going to get 8 hours in my week. So now I'm going to have to do it. So it's not waiting for inspiration to come.
No.
That's true. I got up this morning at 6 and just went straight into my desk and worked. I said, I'll have to do 1 hour. And I didn't feel like it. But once you sit down, you do it. It's like
Yep.
exercise. Who wants to get up and go to the gym? Not me, but you have to do it.
Or not.
So,
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for just getting your bum on the seat and start typing on the keyboard. We can find it's easy to find distractions and burn waste time on social media and checking emails, and I think we've all been guilty of it. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for just getting yourself in front of the computer and the keyboard. And some days you just have to grind out those words and then you start. I often find that just by the actual physical act of writing and the hitting the keyboard with your fingers gets the cogs of my brain moving. If I'm sitting, thinking and dwelling and trying to come up with inspiration, it just doesn't happen. But the moment I start actually physically banging those keys, even if they're really ugly words, I find the juices start to flow. Can you both
oh
relate
yeah,
to that?
for sure. You have to create the habit. It's not getting inspired and then going and sitting down. Like if you create the habit, because once you get a certain way into it, you will hit that point of flow, and that's just a beautiful feeling. You also get hit rabbit holes and go down them and get frustrated, but it's you don't write a book in one sitting. It's going to take a while. So you just chip away as much as you can until you're getting into that flow. And I say to people when they're like, well, what should I do? Get a dog, because like I nearly credited my book to my dog, because walking's great for thinking through things. I get all my good plot points sorted out, worked out when I'm walking. So that dog got very well walked during COVID. Also, we couldn't go anywhere. So it was like, oh, walk the dog again for the third time today, you know.
Yeah.
So walking's good for thinking.
I find lying in a bath is really good for thinking.
Same, or the shower. Something about water.
Yeah,
Like
water's
everyone says
great.
the shower. I work a lot of good things out in the shower as well. Yeah.
We were gifted a spa bath, and so I named it the think tank.
That's
I was
great.
lying there for a while and come up with the ideas.
I just realized I'm sitting in the dark because it's it's daylight savings where you are, and so
Yeah.
it
Right.
was light when I started. Now it's dark. So
Well, Jack's room's looking beautiful.
yeah,
I
that's
know. I've just pulled the curtains out, even though it's dark outside. Strange, they've got all this daylight coming. I don't know how that's
it's
working,
very
but
tidy.
Queensland.
It doesn't look like a writer's room at all.
Christine, question I've been dying to ask you. Since you've been published, has your life changed? And if so, how?
Not really. Has it changed? No, my life hasn't changed. The way I feel about my writing's probably changed. Um, um, yeah, I mean, Martin Scorsese hasn't come knocking yet, so you know, there's no film underway or
Mm,
Hollywood red carpets planned in the near future. Um, you know, has it changed? There's been some great things that have happened in the last few months, and I am very, very grateful. But I still have the same job. You know, my kids don't really care. Like, yeah, they cared a little bit at first, like they're excited in theory, but like, you know, they don't really care if I say I have to go and write, you know, like, yeah,
mm,
whatever.
mm.
I don't have any clean socks, you know, so that's that. Um, I think I have to be, I think I feel differently about that, maybe that it's legitimate what I'm doing, you know. I think that relief thing that we were talking about, that immense relief. I mean, I spent a lot of time writing this book, and to do that, I had to sacrifice certain things, particularly a lot of family time of just going, Mum's doing this, I need to do this, I need a bit of time to do this. And I did feel like, oh, thank God, it's turned into something, you know, it's an
Mm.
actual book and it's recognized, you know, because otherwise, there's a bit of that guilt about having spent so much time on something. And that's wrong. Like, I shouldn't feel that way. Like, you know, creative outlets are important to people, to men and to women equally. And I think, particularly for women, we feel like we have to justify it. Um, so yeah, I think that's a factor as well in sort of maybe what I'm doing, feeling like, well, it's a recognized thing, and so I need to make time for that, and
Mm.
I'm putting boundaries around it a bit better.
You use the word legitimate, and that sort of segues into another question I was going to ask around at what point um, do you feel comfortable saying, I'm a writer? Obviously, you've still got your professional career, and I suppose my question is how you has how you identify yourself or define yourself changed at all? You know, at some point, uh, you know, because we've got this imposter syndrome, I feel uncomfortable still saying, "Oh, I'm a writer." When people ask me what do you do?
Mm.
At what point do you feel comfortable kind of owning that tag, so to speak?
I don't know if I still do. I think it depends who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to other writers and authors, then yeah, I would say I'm a writer. If I'm at work, you know, in a professional capacity, because what I'm doing is so different from this, I guess it just doesn't come up that much, really. Uh, but I think if you write, you're a writer, and anyone who writes is a writer. And there's a difference between being a writer and an author. An author is someone who's had a book published. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm a writer, and I'll always be a writer, whether or not my next book gets published or the one after that or the one after that. And so anyone who writes should be able to call themselves a writer and should own that, I think. It's probably the first step in actually taking yourself seriously.
Yeah. And what's on the go now? You said you're writing something new. Is it something brand new or continuation of a book two, perhaps?
I am writing a book too. I can't say too much more about it right now, but
Yep.
yes, I have book two and book three sort of pretty well mapped out. But I started writing book three, which is a standalone novel. I've written about half of it, and then this other one came into my head that I couldn't get out and realized I need to write that first. So I've put this other one aside. I still plan to write it or finish it, but I'm working on something else, which is a follow-up.
Do you find though, did you find that because you'd invested so much time in creating your characters, you're setting the storyline, even though it comes to a conclusion, that it's hard to let go, and that, the natural next step is to say, I want to continue this world, I'm so invested, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm done. That was a standalone. I want to move on to something new.
I don't know that it's I'm compelled to. Like I always thought there might be a second book in my book because I'd written quite a lot of extra stuff that didn't end up in it because there was so much, it was almost two books worth. Um, and I thought there would be one other book in it, potentially a related book. But it wasn't so much about these characters. I need to continue with them. There's a couple who I think are not done yet, but I could not see me writing a 5-book, 10-book series. I don't. I think I would get frustrated and bored with that.
Mm,
Um, and so there's definitely one more in the mix, and I suspect that they will be put to bed after that. And
mm.
yeah, I have other ideas about other characters and other settings as well. And I'm not sure that I want to just write crime. We'll see.
I think, well, Harry and I can both relate to that. Well, Harry, yours is a 4-book series. My first was a 3-book series. But towards the end, I started getting ideas of a fourth, but I just felt it was time to move on. I needed to rediscover a new story, new characters, new setting. As a result, I embarked on something new. But it was something I definitely gave some thought to. But different experts will say that, there's in terms of marketing and longevity, there are benefits of series and sales and so on. But I guess ultimately you just have to kind of follow your heart wherever that story is. Like you mentioned, Christine, you had this idea that you felt you had to write about, and I think that will probably propel most writers, is what is it that you want to write about?
Yeah, for sure. I don't begrudge anyone writing like long series, but I don't think I could stick with someone for that long. I think, and if you're bored writing it, no one's going to want to read it. So
Mm.
that's a telltale sign. Whereas if you're rushing to write it, and yeah, you feel propelled to do it, I think that is a good sign. For
You
sure.
do,
And I don't know about the series versus standalone as well. There's mixed ideas about that. Do you read a lot of series? Like I have got a couple of series that I've read, and they're sort of maybe 3 books, but I've never followed like a 10-book series with the same character myself.
no,
I,
I think it does have some sort of like the relevance of the character and what they do does sort of weigh, and you can get a 10, 20, 30 book series if you're dealing with a detective, because and you're writing crime, because that's what they do, but if your protagonist is not a detective writing a series of numerous books, you do, as I've come into this sort of issue of the whole sort of Die Hard situation, where how can all of this happen to the same person?
exactly.
It gets a little bit too much, and I mean I'm pushing it with. I mean I originally had 5 in my series, but dropped one out for other reasons I've mentioned in the past. But 4 is now is the maximum I'm going to go. I mean it's now four novels and 30 odd short stories, so with the same character as the protagonist. And it's not that I'm tired of it, it's just that you can't keep the same thing over and over again. You've got to, and I'm sort of gagging at wanting to go and do something else and write something else. And so yeah, that's part of it, is new opportunities.
Mm. Yeah. And as you say, like it just gets a bit ridiculous. I read one recently and oh, come on, come on. How much can this person take? Like, really? Don't they just want to go on a holiday or?
Yeah.
And I guess it's about knowing when to finish on a good thing. I think I was reading, I was to is it Patricia Cornwell's Case Scarpetta series, and she's a forensic
Yeah, yeah,
specialist. I think I don't know how many books, how many Case Scarpetta books there are now, maybe 20 plus. It's been written over, three
yeah,
decades.
yeah.
But I read one of her most recent books, and I felt quite disappointed. And I read the reviews, and a lot of people were saying she should have given up well before now. She was trying to tease it out way too much, and the character was just, the wheels were kind of falling off. So I think you kind of just got to know when's a good time to finish strong, so that you can put that to bed. And I think
Move
it's also
on.
helpful too. Along the mix, I was writing crime fiction, but then I wrote a historical mystery of the twisted time travel. I wrote a speculative fiction because
Hmm.
it was healthy for me to try my hand at writing something different. So I think there is some. Yeah, there's some value in deciding when's the good time to pull up stumps with this series. But I guess it's going to come down to the success and how many people are asking you. I'm still getting people saying, when's book four coming out? And sadly, there is probably not going to be a book four, but it's nice. It's nice when people say that to you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that can be a bit of a problem though, I think, for some authors. It can be a bit tempting to go back for for the audience, but I think you
Mm.
have to know when to let it go.
Again, congratulations on the publication of your new book, The Community, and we wish you all the best. We'll certainly keep a very close eye on your writing career, and look forward to your next book coming out.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me along. It's been great.
Thanks
No,
very much.
absolutely.
It's been really good. Yeah.
Absolutely our pleasure. So we'll say goodbye now before the internet crashes on us again.
Yeah.
All the best, and we'll say goodbye. Good night, everyone.
Good
Bye now.
night. Thank
Cheers.
you.